Man vs. 50 with author Richard Maloof. Real advice and real stories on topics, regardless of age, and important to the modern man. Now, here's Richard.
All right, how's it going?
Good.
Good.
How are you?
Good. Doing really good.
Good week?
It was a good week.
Yeah.
Thanks for stopping by again.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
It's on the way
Well,
to the coffee shop. So,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
just kidding.
So last week we had a pretty deep topic. We were
Mhm.
talking about regret, and we both had some very different
Mhm.
sides of that, right? And it really got me thinking, and I kind of broke it down into a few different sides that I kind of never thought about. And I think through this exercise, it's really it's forcing me to push myself to really understand a lot about regret
Mhm.
and how big of an effect on you it really does have.
Mhm.
So before we kind of get started, I kind of wanted to talk to you about last week after we talked. Was there anything that you reflected on
Yeah.
that maybe after the
Well,
conversation?
And, I started last week with, I don't have any regrets.
Right.
And maybe some wishes or whatever, but there were several days last week that I had some time to reflect and came up with I wrote down, I'm a writer, I write stuff down, I like lists. And so I wrote down quite a few things just in regard to the kids and with Lori, just different things, nothing monumental, but certainly deeper than I had thought. So
Right.
yeah, it pushed me to think a little bit more. But it was almost a good exercise for me, to go through.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. This is not
Mhm.
easy to talk about. And so I was kind of looking into this. I was thinking about what you had said, because your regret was something that you wish you would have done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And my regret was something that I had done.
Ah, okay.
So as you break them down, I think there are two paths of regret. One is mistake regret,
Mhm.
and one is opportunity regret.
Okay.
And I think organically ours fell into what I would consider a mistake and what you considered an opportunity
Missed.
regret, right?
Yeah.
So I really wanted to dive into the mistake regret and focus on that today and kind of discuss what that looks like, right? And I think part of that is mistake regret hurts. Hurts a lot.
Mhm.
And I think it touches your soul, mistake regret. Because I kind of feel when I broke it down that in the mistake regret, it's a decision that has like a finite consequence, right? So when you are making this decision, you come to that crossroad and you look back, when you come to that crossroad and you get ready to make that decision, you almost have an understanding that something is going to change forever
Mhm.
and never be the same, which is
Yeah.
tough, right?
Yeah.
So you come to that, you make that decision, whatever existed doesn't exist anymore because you made that decision to go right or left,
Mhm.
right? And when you reflect on it, I think it's the hardest regret to get over because you possessed something
Mhm.
and now you don't in that physical state, right? It's not existent anymore. So an example, like we talked about, you come to this road and you have to make a decision about a relationship.
Mhm.
Divorce, if cheating, whatever that decision is,
Mhm.
once that decision is made, nothing will ever be the same again.
Right.
So there were times, like, I'll give some examples of just relationship when I had broken up or come to that crossroad with somebody and went a different way and broke up with that person. in making that decision in the moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. For instance, the relationship was going to end, or if we at some point decided to get back together, that decision still will always linger,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So once I made that decision, I knew it was never going to be the same again. And I think mistake regret is so hard to get over,
Yeah.
because you have to be very vulnerable with yourself to get over mistake regret. Okay?
Agreed.
So it has been, in the things that I look at or think about in the past, it really has been beating myself up about these mistakes that I've made.
Yeah.
And so in hearing some of that, in as we go on with this, is there, I mean, obviously you see the difference in the two. I mean, do you think,
Sure.
looking at some of the opportunities when you kind of push yourself a little bit more, do you think you have any regret?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, the mistakes, the regret
The
mistakes.
regret mistake. Yeah. Yeah, I do. With kids, I'd lose my tongue. And that's something that I just still to this day, I have a really hard time forgiving myself for that.
Is it because you were concerned that you tarnished the image that you had built for the kids?
So twofold. One, I'd say that would be the lesser part of it, but the greater part would be that I didn't give them the example that they needed to move forward in their life. I let them down is how I feel about that. So as they get to that crossroad, when they could go left or right, they could choose to just maybe not say anything or choose to let out a string of cuss words. They've seen me let that cuss word fly.
Right.
So the example that I gave, it's kind of hard for them, at that crossroad. What do? Well, Dad did it. Well, so I feel like I've let them down there. But
Right. I mean, so in the years that have passed, because obviously your kids are older, and I'm assuming this happened at a younger age.
it did, yeah.
I mean, how have you dealt with it yourself? Like, what steps did you go through to deal with it?
I talked to them about it, and explained. Yeah, didn't justify it. That was the first thing that I made sure that they understood, is that I'm not justifying what I did, but here's kind of what led to it. But I try, like I said, it's kind of hard to forgive myself for it, because that's something, like you said, it's never going to be what it was.
Right.
And excuse me, is I can't change that. I like things to be original, and I messed that up.
Right.
But the kids have told me, Dad, it's okay. We understand. Because of their age now, they're in their 20s. They understand. I mean, they're faced with those same crossroads, and they're like, oh, I get it. I get it. Dad wasn't, at the time it was like, Dad said a bad word.
Right.
And now they are more of, oh, I see why. So
do you think, in your situation, it's a little bit different, because you can seek them out, discuss it with them,
right.
Maybe get a forgiveness, maybe get a better understanding, right? I think some of the situations that I've been through,
they're in the past.
They're in the past. You can't
go back.
You can't go back, right? You can't discuss it. You can't. So then it becomes, do I dwell on it? Do I continue to beat myself up on it, or what do I do?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, because I've been there. So I feel like a lot of people can just get stuck in the past.
Yeah.
And very difficult to move forward.
Yeah.
And I think that it has been for me, a process to move forward
Mhm.
and get a better look at what that decision was and do something different about
Yep.
it. So I kind of came up with the 4 things that I did, to
Mhm.
really try to get through this. And we can kind of go through and talk a little bit, but you kind of brought one up. But the first thing I had to do was forgive myself. I mean, that it sounds kind of ridiculous because you're always like, God forgive me or
Mhm.
Jesus forgive me, when I'm probably a harder critic on myself than anybody else.
Yeah.
And I wonder a lot about those decisions. So I think I had to go through and first forgive myself before anything.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I had to reflect,
Hmm.
right? I really had to reflect on the situation, the person I was, everything that kind of went into that thought process of making that decision to go right or left in that crossroad, right? And I think that the reflecting part
Hmm.
is almost not an admission of being wrong,
Yeah. But yeah, it is.
but it kind of is, right? Because
Yeah.
I had to reflect on it a lot, and really just try to understand,
Mhm.
which is not easy.
Mm-mm.
I think men struggle with that part
Well,
of it.
because what you made a decision,
Right.
and you were right,
Right.
but you were wrong, and it's hard to admit. Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm glad you said that, because in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
in the preceding time after that, I felt wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you're not necessarily wrong. It's just the pain of that decision that takes a while to get over,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of some
Mm.
different things. So not only, did I have to forgive myself, reflect on it, I had to be honest. And what I mean by that is I really had to be honest with myself and help myself understand that there was a reason why I made that decision, right? There's always a reason,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
At some point in that moment, there's a reason.
Yeah.
Even with opportunity regret, there's a reason. There's a reason you didn't move to an island.
Yeah.
It could have been as simple as we didn't have enough money
Right.
to buy a house. We didn't have the airfare. We had no jobs lined up. Like whatever that looks like. It's in the moment, it seems that way. And we talked about that too, is why regret's so difficult. Because in the moment and a little time after that, you do feel regret.
Mhm.
But then hopefully it changes
Mhm.
as you continue to forgive yourself, reflect, and again, to be honest, you have to just be honest with yourself. And I'll give an example of that, right? There was someone I was dating, and it was kind of up and down, and I was living in Arizona, and she had gone back home and was coming out to basically set up our life to live together and pursue our life in Arizona. And she was going to go into day trading. So she was a freelancer and built websites and did all this different stuff. Probably one of the smartest women I've ever met. She was brilliant in her way, right?
Mhm.
And she was going to learn how to day trade with her father, and he fronted her some money to go through some modules of practicing day trading to see if she had it,
Mhm.
right? It's not easy at all.
Wouldn't have any idea.
So she went through it, and like the day before she was supposed to come out. So that was going to be her career when she came out. The day before, she didn't get through the module, and her dad decided not to give her the money, bank her the money to
Okay.
basically start day trading.
Okay.
And I was under the stress of, you know, we set up our life, our apartment, our this, or that based on two incomes, based on a partnership,
Mm-hmm.
if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And the day before, she failed.
Yeah.
And so she came out she was coming out for 2 weeks, and then she was going to go back home and then move out. In those 2 weeks, it was very, very hard because I had now carried this burden of the stress of supporting her and waiting for her to find some sort of job and this and that. And it sounds so crazy now because you would just think that was kind of part of what you would do to build this relationship,
Yeah,
right? Is
yeah.
to support each other. But at the time, I think I was working in a job I just did not like. So it was just a pile on.
Yeah, combination.
And this was like the last thing I needed.
Yeah.
And we just fought and fought. And I remember, like it was yesterday, driving her to the airport, getting out, hugging her goodbye. And I knew that would be the last time I ever saw her.
Hmm.
And it was for a very, very long time. And it was probably the hardest breakup I've ever been through in my life. It was very difficult. This is aside from my divorce and things like that. This is years later. And it was very, very difficult. And it affected every aspect of my life. And people who have been through a difficult breakup, and this will be part of another show that we talk about things that as you get older and date, the baggage you carry and the things you carry.
Yeah.
And this is one that affected me because it was rough stuff. And things like that change you. And there's a part of you that, again, will never be the same. And that decision I made, I knew it would never be the same. So at some point, I had to forgive myself.
Mm-hmm.
I had to reflect on it. And I had to really be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Was she the one I was supposed to spend my life with? Right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because we ran into each other years later, and I realized all the things she I'm like, how did I miss this? But there were so many things she wanted in her life that I did not want.
Oh.
She wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. She wanted to have kids. She wanted the white picket fence and that life, and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I beat myself up for so long about that breakup, and it turns out we didn't even want the same things.
Yeah.
So the fourth and last part of dealing with mistake regret is like, what did I learn?
Yeah.
And
Got to come up with something.
you got to come up with something, because what I did learn many years later, and you look back sometimes on that and like, why was I so destroyed over this
Right.
girl?
Yeah.
Like, we weren't even compatible.
Yeah.
But I think people come into your life at a certain time and place.
Mhm.
And for that moment in that time, she was my world.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look back on it, I'm like, why was I like in deep depression over this, when eventually the relationship was going to end anyway, because we totally wanted two different things. So it's funny how that works,
Mhm.
right? So my process, and these things, again, we're coming to you as 52-year-old men who have lived a life and been through two different things, but a lot of life.
Mhm.
And we've had to learn along the way
Yeah.
of how to do some of these things. And so a lot of it, I had to mature enough to forgive myself, to reflect, to be honest. I mean, being honest with yourself sometimes is obviously not easy. And then what did I learn from that? So that exercise of those four things have helped me when I look back on mistakes that I
Mhm.
made.
Well, the last part, what did you learn? I worked for a guy that his little mantra was, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got.
Right.
And so if you don't go through that process, those 4 steps, at least those 4 steps, you're doomed to repeat history.
Right. Right.
You're just going to repeat it.
Isn't that the definition of insanity?
Right.
Do the same thing over and over again,
Yep.
expecting a different
Yep.
outcome. But mistake regret, I think, has, and again, there's doctors out there who could, I'm speaking from my personal experience, that mistake regret feels like the most paralyzing
Mm-hmm.
form of regret there is.
Mm-hmm.
And our next show, when we talk about opportunity regret, we'll see the difference and what our thoughts on that. Opportunity regret seems like a lot lighter,
Yeah, exactly.
but it can be heavy too. But
Yeah.
and I could probably give a million examples of mistake regret. But at some point, again, the forgiving of yourself,
Yep.
but I think the final hurdle over that is, what did I learn, and how much it makes sense now on the journey, right?
Right.
So it really, I think, following those steps for anybody, I think, will definitely help you take a step back and just
Yeah.
reflect on the regret and say, okay, well, it happened. I made the decision, felt right at the time,
Mhm.
regretted it immediately, buyer's remorse,
Right.
cognitive dissonance, isn't it? But what did I learn? And I think part of the wisdom of getting older is a lot of life lessons
Mhm.
learned, and when we give advice to young people or whoever or other men, it's not coming from a place. I didn't read a book
Right.
and say, hey, by the way, chapter 4 says, forgive yourself.
All right.
It's
We've lived it.
chapter 4 of my life.
Yeah.
To have to forgive myself. And so
Yeah.
that's the big difference. And I think that's why, this is some of the things we're discussing and helping people get through some of the stuff. Again, we're putting it in a way, we're not reading it from a textbook. We're
Right.
not doing anything. We are giving, this is my real life.
Mhm.
This is what I went through, and it sucks.
Yep.
And I think sometimes the perception is, that person's got it all together. There's a lot of pain in life. There's a lot of good.
Mhm.
There's a lot of pain. But I think going through that stuff and what we learn kind of shapes the man we are.
Right.
And so I think that it has been a great learning lesson for me as I approach, and I have approached other relationships, because I learned so much. And you do that. You learn and learn and learn. And, nobody, it's like doing this podcast,
Yeah.
each week we learn more and
Something
learn
new,
more.
Right.
And, it's new, but we learn, and that's part of life. And that's why with age comes wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anything else to add to it, or?
No. You want to? How was your week? One good thing that happened this week?
It was good. Why don't you start?
Oh man. Good night. I wasn't prepared. See, I always
You
ask
always
the
say
question.
that,
Yeah. Okay. Something very simple. I told you earlier. I got to drive my car to work, and that was a very fun experience. Just kind of quiet to myself, but I got to
Right.
hear my.
Well, tell people what you have.
It's Mustang, a 2020 Mustang GT350
Yes.
Heritage Edition. So very special edition,
Right.
3,000 miles.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, we call this our midlife crisis mobiles.
I think I'm past the midlife crisis.
see.
I'm midlife plus.
Okay.
But
That's good.
yeah, but I got to hear the exhaust in the garage,
Right.
and that was fun, and so I got to be 19 again.
Right. It's the little things, right?
It was
it's-
it was a highlight.
And that's another thing. As we get older, the things I love now are, I got a new impact drill. Like, what is happening
How
to me?
did that become?
Like, that's really the highlight of my week is an impact drill. So
Welcome to your 50s, everyone.
yeah, and then like I get excited to go to like Ace Hardware. Like, what is wrong with
Yeah.
me? It's weird. Like the things I get excited about now versus when I was young. But
Yeah. Here we are.
here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we are. I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I've owned it, so
Yeah.
I'm definitely okay with it.
Embrace it. Yeah. All right. You're a good thing.
I think I kind of heard something that was really good, a story. So I won't always have a story, but for some reason, 2 weeks in a row, I've had a story. There was 2 lumberjacks who woke up at the same time every morning and then went out and chopped wood. They worked from 7 to 5 every day. And in the middle of the day, one of the lumberjacks would leave for an hour and come back. And by the time the day was done, they both chopped the same amount of wood. So this went on and on and on. And then one day, the other lumberjack, just out of frustration, was like, how is it that you leave every day for an hour, come back, we start at the same time, you leave for an hour, we get off at the same time, but we cut the same amount of wood? How is this happening? And the other lumberjack looks at him and goes, when I leave for an hour, I go home and sharpen my blade.
Oh, that's good.
That's deep.
Yeah.
Makes you think,
Yeah.
right? There's so many things to unpack with that
Yeah.
story.
He's
You know.
working-
And we can talk about it
Working
in
smarter,
another
not
show, but
harder.
it
Yeah.
is, there's a lot there. But
Yeah.
that's again one of those, again, that I'm like, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. So I love hearing stories like that. I like things like that really, make you think and,
Yeah. We may edit this out, but the story of regret, and the mistake regret. There was a father and a son that were talking. The son was getting mad, and the dad, the son was he was angry, and he was saying things he shouldn't say and doing things he shouldn't do. And so the dad said, I want you to take, every time that you feel like you need to say something, so let's just say it was a cuss word. You want to say a bad word. I want you to take a nail and a hammer, and I want you to hammer it into the fence and leave it there. And the kid said, okay, fine. So he did it. And so the dad, however much time elapsed. And so he told the son, he goes, all right, how do you feel now? And he goes, well, I feel better. I kind of feel like I've kind of gotten it under control. He said, man, that's great. He said, I want you to go pull the nails out of the fence. And tell me that, when you're done. So he pulled up, 30 nails in there. He pulls them out and he goes, tell me, what do you see with that piece of wood? And he goes, there's holes in them. And he goes, every time that you say something, it changes the relationship that you have. And so those holes are representative of the things that you say to people. And they always remember that.
All right. That's good.
Anyway, it was
That's
very
good. I like that a
anyway,
lot. All right. Well, thank you again.
You got it.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
And
Same.
I'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
All right, man.
Thanks for watching Man vs. 50 with author Richard Maloof. Don't forget to subscribe.